Hello everyone, I wish you good health and success. Here are the main points in the video. Shocking news. Ukraine's unimaginable weapon has turned Mother Nature into an asymmetric killer. A low-cost combat system riding the constant western winds is quietly exhausting and eroding the Kremlin's billion-dollar air defense network. From the inside, can Moscow survive a ruthless economic equation where they are forced to launch expensive strategic missiles worth millions of dollars? Red alert, Ukraine launches a torpedo-like strike from the atmosphere. Ukraine has taken a bold leap forward by successfully launching the Hornet suicide drone equipped with autonomous AI directly from an extreme altitude of 10 kilometers. It glides silently and penetrates all automatic electronic warfare systems by using terrain mapping to strike directly at top-secret targets of the opponent, a dilemma with no way out. From the operations room perspective, air defense must either fight until resources are exhausted or stay silent as oil refineries burn. Here is the analysis in details. 288 strikes destroyed the infrastructure. Hongchuanga neutralized the fortifications. Ladies and gentlemen, in modern military art, geopolitics is not only defined by borders or strategic depth, but sometimes it is determined by the immutable laws of nature themselves. At the mid-latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere, from 45 to 52 degrees north, the atmosphere operates according to an eternal principle. The temperate westerly winds continuously blow from west to east. For the current conflict situation, this geographical feature unintentionally becomes a harsh fate, as the wind always blows directly from Ukrainian territory toward Russia. A bitter reality for Moscow is that they cannot replicate or reverse this natural weapon. Because if the wind blows from the Russian side, it will only blow farther east towards Siberia, Bora, or the neighboring country Kazakhstan. The combination of natural conditions and flexible military thinking gave birth to a combat system that, though simple, is full of ingenuity, marking a revolutionary turning point that began in 2024. At first, the balloons were only released into enemy airspace for the purpose of deception and reconnaissance, but later they gradually evolved into vehicles carrying homemade bombs. Along with that, Ukraine established a network of stationary balloons positioned at altitudes from 500 to 1,000 meters, produced by the company Aroba. If held by a direct power transmission cable system, these platforms can patiently remain in the air for up to 3 consecutive days and nights. They serve as powerful relay stations, connecting and guiding both FPV drone squadrons and medium-range attack drones from distances of hundreds of kilometers. Equipped with advanced camera systems and sensors, these stationary balloons not only hunt down long-range suicide drones and other aerial threats, but can also link and disrupt signals over distances of up to 100 kilometers, weaving a seamless control network for long-range weapons that challenges all suppression efforts. The most dramatic and groundbreaking breakthrough in this evolution took place in May 2026. Turning all conventional defense calculations upside down, Ukraine successfully tested an unprecedented combat method, launching suicide drones directly from a hovering helium balloon. The results of the test far exceeded all observers' expectations. The balloon released a suicide drone from its underside called Hornet. The Wasp dropped from the air, took advantage of lift and wind power to travel up to 42 kilometers deep into enemy airspace without activating its engine, consuming not a drop of fuel and without using any of the battery's power. The balloon also raised the drone to a strategic altitude of up to 8 kilometers. This ideal altitude opens up a second life or death advantage. When released from high above, the drone can glide a massive distance before it needs to start its engine to accelerate toward the target. For a drone launched from the ground, the first few kilometers are always an exhausting climb, struggling against gravity and burning through a large amount of battery power. In contrast, the drone launched from the balloon preserves that precious energy, reaching the drop point with 95% of its battery almost intact. This combination delivers a terrifying mathematical performance. The standard range of about 150 kilometers for the Hornet series is instantly doubled to 300 kilometers. 3 optimal advantages stacked together, from free transportation to ideal altitude to preserved energy, creating a long-range destructive weapon. Manufactured by Perennial Autonomy, a US-based company, the Hornet is a fixed-wing suicide drone with a wingspan of nearly 2 meters, gliding silently through the air at about 100 kilometers per hour and carrying a 5-kilogram warhead. However, what makes it a terrifying threat doesn't lie in its speed or destructive power, but in the integrated artificial intelligence brain inside. When Russian electronic warfare tries to cut its control signals, the drone automatically uses its AI and preloaded terrain maps to independently find and strike the target. Even Russian electronic warfare technicians have to admit in internal reports that this is an extremely dangerous weapon because when they manage to cut the signal, that's when the AI takes over the power of life and death. The biggest fear for the military is that the combination of modern technology and advanced meteorology has turned the traditional dependence on wind direction, which used to be a weakness, into a problem with an exact solution. Thanks to AI models and advanced algorithms, wind movement trajectories can now be predicted with combat-level accuracy. Mobile flight teams only need 15 minutes to complete the entire process from preparation to launching the balloon in any terrain. Once they reach an altitude above 10 kilometers, these objects are almost unaffected by extreme weather. Their movement is more stable with lower drag, and they have an operational range far beyond ordinary expectations. In fact, there has been a record of a Ukrainian balloon flying more than 4,000 kilometers deep into Russian airspace. Against this invisible weapon that rides the air currents, Russia's multi-billion-dollar air defense network is completely rendered helpless, as radar cannot detect it. Missiles cannot lock onto the target, and electronic warfare systems are completely powerless against an object that does not use any engine. Doubling the range of a weapon that already has the ability to penetrate 160 kilometers behind enemy lines has officially erased the concept of a safe zone behind the front lines, turning the entire strategic depth of the enemy into an exposed death zone. Let's look at the telling numbers to see the harsh disparity of the battlefield reality. A missile from the Panzer S air defense system costs between 60,000 and 100,000 US dollars. An S-300 missile costs over 500,000 US dollars. And the vaunted 48N6 missile used by the S-400 system costs over 1 million US dollars. However, they are having to launch those million-dollar weapons, even firing multiple missiles just to intercept a balloon that costs only a few hundred US dollars. According to Colonel Victor Kevluk's calculations, the daily operating cost of a tethered balloon is only 15 US dollars. When combining a balloon with a Hornet suicide drone, the entire combat system has a starting price of only about 6,000 US dollars. This asymmetry doesn't stop at the production cost. It also wears down the enemy's strength through indirect and lingering expenses. Thousands of balloons are continuously released into the air, forcing the Russian air defense network to remain on permanent alert. Radar stations have to scan continuously, personnel have to stay up all night at the launchers, and equipment is always in a state of combat readiness. The price to pay for human exhaustion, enormous electricity consumption, and the mechanical wear and tear of weapons under this extreme tension is thousands of times higher than the value of a single unmanned flying object. It's an invisible but deadly war of attrition, forcing the enemy to waste resources on each individual target, with no way to reverse this ruthless arithmetic. What has made it possible to sustain such a large-scale and enduring asymmetric campaign? The answer lies in a resilient domestic supply chain that is completely immune to global geopolitical fluctuations. These balloons themselves are made from extremely common and basic industrial materials such as latex, nylon, or polyethylene. All of these are produced and sourced entirely within Ukraine, allowing its military to completely cut off dependence on supplies from China and escape the import bottleneck. Even the source of helium gas used to fill the compartments is surprisingly affordable, because these military balloons do not require the high-purity helium used in laboratories. Regular industrial-grade helium is more than enough for them to take off. In the context of the fierce outbreak of the Iran-Israel conflict, which threatens to paralyze gas production in Qatar, a reliable battlefield source confirmed that helium supplies for the Ukrainian battlefield has not been interrupted and the supply remains abundant. Meanwhile, the cost of the Hornet suicide drone ranges from 5,000 to 12,000 USD, depending on the specific equipment configuration. A production system based on simple raw materials but delivering maximum destructive efficiency has turned available resources into an endless weapon assembly line. The climax was the massive drone firestorm attack directly on Moscow and the Tatarstan region in September 2025. Balloon tactics were deployed on an unprecedented scale. Even Russian sources were shocked to admit that they witnessed countless balloons covering the sky, completely blinding all defensive radar systems. These spearheads have turned oil refineries, vital railway networks, and logistics centers deep in the enemy's rear into piles of ashes. By the end of 2025, balloons will officially be commissioned as a direct bomb delivery platform. Before making a decisive leap in May 2026, with the successful test launch of the Hornet suicide drone. From the air, from decoys to reconnaissance, from bomb carriers to mobile launch platforms among the clouds. With each step of evolution, the balloon becomes smarter, more dangerous, but also more cost-effective. The overall picture of the real effectiveness of this atmospheric revolution has been recorded by the independent analysis group OCNI through specific and impressive data. In just 2 months, from February to March 2026, Ukraine's medium-range drone raids more than doubled, reaching at least 288 successful strikes. The destroyed locations range from strategic resupply depots, logistics convoys, and power grid infrastructure, to even the air defense systems protecting Russia's rear areas. The operations enabled by balloons were the main driving force behind this surge, and the combined test between the tethered balloon system and the Hornet drone series is the most advanced link in this evolutionary chain, but it's certainly not the final stage. So far, intelligence agencies have only confirmed that just 2 of these types of Ukrainian weapon systems have been destroyed. This is proof that their survival rate on the battlefield is astonishingly high. The free-floating balloons drift with the wind to penetrate deep into enemy territory, combined with the tethered balloon systems anchored within controlled areas. All of these have formed an invisible but solid backbone that supports the entire aerial combat ecosystem of Ukraine. It pushes the enemy into a war of attrition, where victory is gradually leaning toward the side that knows how to control the skies. If the commander decides to press the button to fire, a missile worth millions of dollars will be launched into the air to destroy a cheap object, and that ammunition stockpile will be completely depleted just before the real wave of attack arrives only a few minutes later, following a completely different trajectory. On the other hand, if they choose to remain silent and ignore it, that balloon might actually be carrying a real warhead, and just a few hours later, an oil refinery could be engulfed in flames. No matter what decision is made, the price to pay is always too high. Moscow, the capital, has suffered most from this harsh paradox. The appearance of atmospheric ghosts approaching this strategic center of power forced airports to temporarily close, all civilian flights to be completely suspended, and the air traffic control system to fall into a state of paralysis. A battlefield source confirmed that when these invisible entities approach sensitive target areas like the capital, panic will spread, causing the defense forces to open fire unconditionally. And every time they fire, the scenario Ukraine has set up plays out in full. A surface-to-air missile is wasted, a radar system is exposed, and the enemy's air defense capability is further eroded. However, this asymmetric system still carries inherent technical limitations. The biggest obstacle is the ability to control its direction. Once the balloon is released into the air and surrenders to the wind, the operator has no way to steer or navigate it as desired. Even though AI weather models can predict air currents trajectories with high accuracy, the atmosphere is inherently a chaotic system, and a large margin of error is unavoidable in every launch. A sudden change in wind direction means the balloon will drift completely off its strategic target, and when the weather turns bad, the deployment window will be narrowed or completely closed. The Ukrainian military can't attack at will. They must wait patiently, depending on nature's permission. Although the Hornet's AI-integrated terrain mapping navigation technology offers a partial solution, claiming that it is absolutely reliable in every combat scenario at this point is still overly optimistic. In addition, it must be acknowledged frankly that the combination of the balloon system and the Hornet drone is still only at the experimental stage. The exercise was more successful than expected, but an actual attack campaign recorded by this system has yet to be independently verified, and the claim of an extended range of up to 300 kilometers still needs more time to be tested in real combat. Even if out of 100 balloons released, only 10 reach their targets, the math still favors Kyiv. Ukraine only spends a few $1,000s on simple equipment, while Russia has to burn through hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in air defense missiles to intercept them. This war of attrition doesn't require perfection. It only needs persistence and sustained repetition. After every 10 test cycles and each AI algorithm update, the system improves itself to become more reliable. This evolution doesn't stand still. It reflects a defining pattern of how Ukraine is fighting this war. Even as the shift moves decisively toward cheaper solutions, simpler, but to be deployed on a much larger scale. They have come a long way from expensive missiles to cheap suicide drones, and now to harnessing the free wind from nature. With each step, financial asymmetry increasingly tightens its grip on Russia's defense economy. This is the mind map that is reshaping the entire landscape of modern warfare. While the traditional defense industry is still engrossed in producing weapon systems worth billions of dollars, Ukraine is achieving equivalent deterrence with systems costing only a few $1,000s, with operating expenses fully covered by wind currents. Imagine a provocative scenario where a Ukrainian unmanned vehicle suddenly appears right in the middle of Red Square. An autonomous combat ecosystem is taking shape, spanning from the skies to beneath the sea and underground, characterized by low cost, automation, and easy scalability. In your opinion, does this strategy of leveraging the wind combined with AI truly eliminate the concept of a safe zone behind the front lines? What do you think about these new, highly effective moves and weapons Ukraine keeps coming up with? Necessity really is the mother of invention. Ukraine is indeed resilient and resourceful.